Hello, and welcome to a Wine Affair podcast. Thank you for joining us. I know for those of you that follow us, we normally start with what's in your glass, but tonight we have a surprise for you, so please stay tuned for that. I'm not going to say anything more because I don't want to give it away. But I have a special guest tonight, someone that I met a while back, and I also have done an Instagram Live with. I want to introduce our guest, Kendeigh Warden, tonight. And she is the Grape Grind on Instagram. You probably follow her, and if you don't, you should. She knows a lot, and she can teach you a lot. So I want to welcome Kendeigh to our podcast. Kendeigh, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to do it. And yes, I'm still learning a lot too in the process.
Yeah, well, we all are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back to when you and I first met. Let's recap that so people can kind of catch up with that.
Sure. Yes.
So I know we connected on Instagram. We kind of kept in touch for a bit, and I was fascinated by what you were doing online with all of that, and it was so cool. And I eventually reached out to you and asked you to do a live with me.
Yes.
So that's how we kind of started, and it was so fun, and I learned so much. And I always do when I look at your site or talk to you. It's always little tidbits of valuable information. They're like little gold nuggets. So yeah, can you explain to our guests like what exactly you do and how you got started in the wine biz? I know I love this. So
yeah. Well, it's funny because we talked before this and I thought about it. I was like, wow, I put that together in such a nice cohesive way, but really all of it was messy. It's been a kind of like a messy experiment. And so I, never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. My background is I started out in design. I went to design school in Chicago. And then after that, I came back, went to Ohio State, and I got my master's in education. And I taught kids for a good chunk of time. And I got a summer job at a fine dining restaurant. And, to supplement my teacher income, my sad teacher income.
Summers, a good way
and to it was a great way to spend my summers. Yes. And I got really I was lucky to be at a really, great restaurant. It was a great place to learn about fine dining, about wine. The people were great. The environment was great. It was a really good work environment. And I got into wine there. They had, sommeliers that were working there, and I was so intrigued. I liked wine at the time. I loved hospitality. I loved taking care of people and talking to them about food and wine. And I thought, after that summer, I was like, this is great. This is enjoyable. This is fun. I'm really passionate about this. I think I'm gonna leave teaching and I'm gonna work in restaurants. And so I did. I kind of, in a sense, it's like I threw away my master's degree. I did not throw it away because I still use education in what I do. But I went and I worked in restaurants, and I said, I'm going to work my way kind of up the restaurant ladder. I, just kind of work different positions, maybe eventually, be a sommelier or, run a wine program and that sort of thing. And so I've been in restaurants for a good 12, 13 years. And because even before I was teaching, I worked at the airport bar and yeah, so let's see, I took my intro somm exam while I was working in restaurants, started having kids. And I kind of used Instagram, and I created a blog as an outlet for, just fun place to store wine information, kind of get it all out, put it somewhere, use a little bit of that design that was in my head that I started with. And so I started a blog, I started an Instagram, and kept working in restaurants. And then COVID happened.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And yeah, everybody, there's so many people that can start their
right.
the next chapter of their life story with, then COVID happened. But yeah, COVID happened, and restaurants shut down. My kids were home. And I found out I was pregnant with my third child. And I said, you know what? Like, I just can't go back to working at restaurants. It wasn't sustainable. You know, I was up late. I was getting up at 5 a.m. I was kind of like this walking zombie for a while. And it was a little bit heartbreaking because I loved working in hospitality. And I was like, well, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. And so I thought maybe I'd work in distribution for a little bit, kind of see that side of things. I hadn't done it, you know, that part of it. But they were on a hiring freeze too. So I was kind of at a loss. And I was talking to my husband's an entrepreneur, and he's like, you know, you have this blog, you could turn this blog into some sort of business. And so I started working on that over COVID, and I was lucky to work with just some contacts that I had met through Instagram, and just through the wine community, you know, over the past year that I had been blogging. And I started doing tastings for a company, and ended up using them eventually to source wine for my own tastings. And so I started doing virtual tastings, and that was great. It was a great thing to do during, you know, when the world was shutting down, and, you know, my kids were home. So it was great. I could put them to bed and I could hop on my computer and do a virtual tasting. And I got really, at that point in time, I started getting really into blind tastings. I was doing a lot of those. So that is, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's where you don't know what the wine is. And so you know, people would get sent bottles that were pre-wrapped, and I would walk them through the blind tasting process, and they would have to guess what the variety is. You know, it's something they use for exams, but everybody can do it. And yeah, more on that in a little bit. But yeah, so I did tastings for a little while. When the world opened up again, I did in-home tastings and events for a little while. And then I kind of pivoted a little bit and started doing educational materials, PDF downloads, that sort of thing. And that's what I currently do now. I'm real big on creating wine education materials for exams, or just for people that are really nerdy and into wine and want to, you know, learn more, dig a little bit deeper. And I'm really big on blind and comparative tastings. It's one of my big passions. I think it's so fun. I have a blind tasting club and a way where people can purchase bottles and blind taste themselves. And there's a little side component tasting group to that where we meet over Zoom and blind taste as well. So yeah, I've kind of dabbled in a lot over the past 3 years. And I would not say I would have never thought I'd be in this space, but it's definitely feels like the right space for me. And yeah, I'm excited to share all of that.
Well, it's neat how it all comes together too. You know, your design mentality, both with the blog and how you host the events and the tastings, and your educational background. Like, yes, you're 100% putting that master's to work.
Right, exactly. I did not throw that away.
Just a different type of student. So I think that's amazing. And you mentioned with some of your educations and tastings that you've been doing blind and comparative. So blind, I can kind of figure out, but what do you mean by comparative tasting? What's the difference between
So blind tasting is where you don't know what the wine is at all. So somebody just hands you a glass of something. What is this? A comparative tasting is when you know kind of what you're tasting, and you have not just one, but at least two wines next to each other. And so you are comparing, you are doing some sort of comparison. So really, like a flight, a wine flight is a comparative tasting. So a lot of people have done comparative tasting, especially if you've been to a winery. You know, a lot of times they'll do the wine flights, and you can taste the wine side by side and you know, think about them. And both of them are really helpful for understanding the different components of wine. So you know, like acid or body or all that, if you're unsure kind of how to gauge that, if you taste two wines side by side, if your mouth is watering more with one of them, well, then that's higher acid. And it's easier to tell than if you had just had that glass of wine like on its own. And yeah, and with blind tasting, and I mentioned this before, it removes that bias, you know. If somebody hands you a glass of Pinot Noir and you like don't like Pinot Noir, you're gonna be thinking about it somewhere in your head is this little like, I'm not gonna like this, you don't like this wine, like. But if you taste it blind, you have absolutely no idea what it is. So you just have to focus on your senses and think about what you're smelling and tasting. And I've always found that just blind tasting so fascinating because it removes that bias. And so you really just have to get into your head and think about, you know, the nuances of the wine and your palate.
Yeah. I think that point right there is so key because wine is so subjective, as you know.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah.
People, when they get it in their head that they don't like something because they had that one time where the wine was too dry or too this or too that, and they're convinced that every wine of that varietal tastes the same way. It's really hard to like get somebody to try something else of that same varietal.
Yes.
So I love the blind tasting as a tool for that because you're right, it just completely eliminates that.
Yeah. And you can do blind tasting with like the same variety from different places and see, you know, the difference between different places. So yeah, it's fun. It is a fun tool.
So neat. So how do we do it? Like you were mentioning dry and sweet, and I think even people kind of misunderstand what those terms mean because they may taste the flavors and think, oh, this is so sweet, but really it's not. So walk us through how do we break down a blind tasting to figure out what the wine is?
Yeah. So, I mean, you are using all your senses. You're doing what you would normally do when you taste wine. You're just not really thinking about it if you're just sitting and enjoying a glass. If you're going into blind taste, you're actually really thinking about your senses, and it starts with sight. So you're looking at the wine, you're looking at the color, you're looking at the concentration, whether or not you can see through it. Those can give you clues about the grape. You're smelling it and you're saying, okay, is this wine aromatic or not? There are certain varieties that are more aromatic than others. Then you're tasting it and you're looking for, you know, people go real hard on the tasting notes, you know, for the fruit tasting notes, and it'll always be a thing of debate, you know, the tasting notes in the wine. And it's one of those things that makes people not feel good about wine tasting because they're always like, well, what if I don't get this? Like, is my palate broken? Like if I'm not tasting what I should be tasting? And Cindy, you said it too. It's like, it's so subjective what you're tasting. It really just depends on your experiences and your personal palate. And everybody's is very different. And so when you're blind tasting, I always find it's helpful to look for fruits in camps instead of pinpointing specific fruits. So like for light-bodied red wines, it's like you generally, are you getting more red fruit or are you getting more like black fruit? And go from there. You don't have to pick specifics. I mean, you do for exams, but like if you're just getting started, it's just like pick a bunch of red fruits. Are you getting, you know, if you're getting red fruit, maybe you're getting strawberry, maybe you're getting cherry. And with whites, it's you know, there's more camps. You know, are you getting, you know, tropical fruit or are you getting citrus? So kind of putting that overarching camp on those notes makes it a little bit easier. But even more so, you look for tasting notes, but you also look at the structure of the wine and the acid and the alcohol, tannin for red wines. And you think about, okay, is it high or is it low? In certain varieties, acid's going to be higher than others. Tannin's naturally higher than others in certain varieties. And so the more you taste, the more you like commit those things to memory, like, oh, I've tasted a lot of Nebbiolo, the tannin is really high. And so, you know, if you're blind tasting and there's a really tannic red, you're like, this could be Nebbiolo. So you start kind of thinking about varieties that, you know, exude these different structural components and committing that to memory, and you just have to taste a lot, and then just keep tasting. Yeah, and it really is personal at the end of the day. You know, the exams use these structures that are so they feel kind of boxy, and in a sense they can be, but I think when you're practicing, really thinking like, you know, if you're studying for exam, okay, yes, they're going to want this. But if I'm just doing this for fun, like I am going to just jot down whatever I get. And, you know, maybe I'll get that the next time I'm tasting this variety.
No, that's neat. And I like how you said both comparative and blind. And for me, I am studying for an exam, but my fiance is just trying to figure out which wines he likes and doesn't like, or what's the difference between these wines.
Yeah.
And so I think a balance between blind and comparative will help us.
Just
kind of figuring them out too, because he's just like, well, this tastes like this. What does that mean? And so I think, I think we're going to have to start practicing this a lot more.
Yes.
Sitting down and comparing. I love doing flights just to see the differences, because that helps you pull out the flavors. I can't just sit down with one glass and pull out the flavor without comparing it to something.
Right.
But I also like the blind aspect, taking out knowing what it is, so I can't guess the flavor.
Yeah, it's a great way. And you could even like do like pick 3 wines, so it's like you know what they are, and then have them poured for you blind. So you have some idea what the wines are, but you don't know the order.
Which one? Okay, yeah.
So I don't know. There's so many ways you can do it. We do this at my house all the time. My husband is always like, we never drink the same wine twice, and we never just sit down and open a bottle of wine. We always have like 2 next to each other. And that's just the way it is here in this house, and it's okay.
I enjoy it. I like that so much more. Yes, we do the same thing at my family. I'll have multiple glasses, and my cousins are like, are we drinking all of this? I'm like, it's just a little bit.
Yes, yes.
Not a full glass.
Yes, it's a taste.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so let's try this. I know Cindy and I both poured some surprises.
Yes.
I don't know how you want to do, Cindy, if you want to go first, or
okay, sure.
Cindy, you coach us along.
Okay, so I think the best way to do this is I'm gonna ask you about the wine that you're drinking, and so and people that are listening can play along too, because I always like doing this also. So I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna go through the blind tasting process, really relaxed fashion. There's no wrong answers. It's just your immediate gut reaction. Just what are you getting? And I'm going to note these for each kind of category, like sight, nose, palate.
Okay.
And then at the end, I'm going to say, okay, I think maybe it could be like these 3 varieties. And then I'm going to deduce. I'm going to say it's probably not this, because I think, it would be more this or something like that, which is that process of elimination at the end of blind tasting that you do. But yeah, I think we can run through it that way.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So first thing when you're blind tasting is sight. So you're looking at the wine, and the 2 main things, I mean, the exams will get really nerdy, but the most important things are color and concentration. So color, most wines are ruby, but some wines can like lean a little bit more purple. Some wines can lean a little bit more garnet or like orange colored, and that can tell you a little bit about the variety. So what color would you say is your wine?
I would say this wine leans definitely more towards purple.
Okay. So you got this purple hued wine. Now concentration. So this is whether or not you can see through the wine. So if you hold it at an angle, you can maybe you have something underneath it that you could read through, or you could put your hand underneath it. And can you see through it or not? So is it pale? Is it can you see through it a little bit, or is it opaque where you like can't see through it at all?
I can see through it a little bit.
Okay.
But not,
but it's
like
not
in the
super
middle,
pale.
like what you just see. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the medium concentration. Okay. Now, give it a nice swirl.
Okay.
I always love to do this with people on tastings, because it seems so cliche, when people are swirling their glasses at tables. But when you're when you're going through this process, it is beneficial because it lifts the aroma compounds to the surface of the wine faster, or the surface of the glass faster. Okay. So the first thing that you're probably going to get on the nose is fruit. We know fruit. We like fruit. Fruit is easy to associate. So if you had to kind of pick one, okay, actually, if you had to pick one, or maybe there's both. Is there more red fruit? Is there more black fruit? Or are you getting a little bit of both?
Black fruit for sure.
Okay. Got it. And you could, anything specific or just broad category?
Definitely getting some flavors of plum. I would say dark plum.
Okay.
Blackberries for sure.
Okay.
A little hint of vanilla.
Okay.
And a little bit of oak.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. So you talked a little bit about the oak, the kind of secondary characteristics that come from winemaking. Is there anything that is like an indication of like age? And so this is like a leather or earth or like tobacco or cedar or kind of like any sort of meaty quality.
Yeah, I would say I'm getting some tobacco in there for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's coming through more now with more when I went back to the glass just now.
Okay.
Yeah,
a little bit of tertiary. You got
tertiary.
Some oak, and you got some black fruit, and you got this purple wine, medium concentration. Okay, so now we go to structure. Now this is the backbone of the wine for people that are curious. A lot of people have seen these words so much and know exactly what they are, but we'll go through them anyway. So body. So best comparison for this that you've probably seen is the milk comparison, where it's like skim water, doesn't weigh down your palate, goes down easy, and those are going to be like your lighter bodied wines. Your 1 to 2% milk feels a little more heavy on the palate. It kind of weighs down your tongue just a little bit more. Those are going to be like your medium bodied wines. And then the full bodied wines are like heavy cream, where it's like they coat your palate, they weigh your palate down. You can really feel that heaviness. So when you taste this wine, does it feel like light bodied, medium bodied, or full bodied?
I would say it's medium to full.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. So we could say medium plus. That's what medium we do.
Plus, yes. Medium
yes.
plus.
That's what, which makes it easy because you're like, it's one of the two. I'm glad they throw the medium pluses and the medium minuses in there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Range.
Yes, it gives it a nice range. Okay, and then alcohol. So this a lot of times is associated with body because typically higher alcohol wines will be more fuller bodied. But I like to think of it of like where sometimes you can smell it and sometimes you can see kind of this viscosity, but I think of it more as, and I know this is a podcast, so you can't see me, but where the burn is when you are tasting wine. So if you swallow it and it's like burns and then starts to go away, kind of like right below your chin, it's kind of like low alcohol. If it gets kind of like halfway down into your neck and it's burning down your throat, kind of between your chin and your collarbone, medium, and then if you can feel it like in your chest, then that's higher alcohol. So thinking about when you breathe out where that burn is.
That's a great description.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love this.
Isn't that great? I love these
so
tricks.
Yeah. So I would say in the medium range, I am getting it sort of right in here, in my jaw.
Yeah.
Right there.
Got it.
Definitely
So
not
there.
my chest, but yeah.
So medium alcohol. Okay, cool. And acid. And the acid is how much is your mouth watering. So, another thing, just because a lot of people think that like if the wine is tart, or tastes tart in any way, has tart fruit or just tart berries, that it's high acid, but you really want to be thinking about how much you're salivating. And so people will do this where the drool test, where they'll take a sip of the wine and you open your mouth and you lean your head down. And if you're about to like catch your drool, you know, like you have to slurp it back up. It's not the prettiest like thought picture, but if we do this a lot, and so now it's like ain't no thing, but think about like, how much are you salivating? Are you about to like drool, or is it kind of stop short? Low acid wines.
No, I'm
kind of stop short.
It's actually, I'm salivating quite a bit. So
okay.
Yeah.
Would you say medium plus, or would you say high acid?
Yes, I would say medium plus on the acidity. Yeah.
Okay. And then tannin, that's the bitterness and like mouth drying component. So found in the skins and the seeds, it binds to your saliva protein and wipes your mouth dry the more that is there. So a lot of people like Nebbiolo is the benchmark for high tannin.
Right.
Merlot is usually a little smoother. Pinot Noir, a little smoother. Now, the winemaking always plays into this, so there's no definitives. But
right.
Okay. But would you say now? So how much is your palate dried out? Would you say that now high tannin wines are going to make your tongue feel like sandpaper? Low tannin wines are going to go down easy, and you barely feel they don't feel very grippy.
Again, I would have to say medium plus. It doesn't feel like sandpaper,
okay,
but it is quite dry.
Okay.
I can still feel the after effect on my tongue.
Yes. Okay.
So I can feel the drying sensation, but it doesn't feel that sandpaper from other wines that I know could do that. It's not that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So you just went through the blind tasting process. And so that's essentially it. You just kind of memorize this like grid, this flow, and they're different for different certifications. And you can even make your own up if you're not even doing a wine exam, just if you want to have fun with it. But they cover basically the same components. So color, you've got this purple wine that's medium concentration. You've got black fruit. You said plum, blackberry. There's some vanilla, some oak, some tobacco, tertiary notes in it. You've got a medium plus body, medium alcohol, medium plus acid, medium plus tannin wine. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you get any green notes in this wine? Now, green, I'm thinking like vegetal. Do you get any like fresh vegetal notes, like green pepper or like mint or eucalyptus?
Well, here's that subjective thing again, but
right. Tough.
But I am getting a little bit on the nose of eucalyptus, slight.
Okay. Yeah, anything like eucalyptus or herbal or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and the reason I ask is because I guess if I were to narrow down your description, I might be in the Bordeaux varieties camp. And so that is Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. They're all related. You know, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, sometimes Merlot can give off a purple color. All of them oftentimes are medium concentration, show a little bit more black fruit. So yeah, tough.
This is a tough one. I have like 3 guesses in my head.
Merlot, Cab Franc. Yeah, part of me is like, well, it could even be Malbec. If you're not getting that intense green note, could be Malbec because Malbec is purple. I'm gonna say it's not, maybe not Merlot, just because, well, the acid and tannin are medium plus. Everything's kind of around medium, so it could be Merlot. Cab Franc is more purple usually than Merlot. Body, you said was medium plus though.
Do you want me to eliminate one for you? Or that takes away the fun. I don't want to take
that takes away the fun. I'm just going to throw out my guess because blind tasting is all about being wrong. Okay. Also, I'm not tasting it. So that makes it fun. It is fun. I'm going to say that this is, let's do Cabernet Sauvignon. Let's say that I think this is in the Bordeaux family somewhat. If it's Merlot, Cab Franc, or Malbec, it could be.
It is an Argentinian Malbec.
Ah, right. That's like awesome.
Yep.
That's perfect. I mean, purple, oftentimes purple. And that structure is just right in line with Malbec. I think if it was Cab Sauv, it would have been higher acid, higher tannin. So
yeah,
that is where when you do a blind tasting on your own, you go back and you're like, okay, why did I get this wrong? And for me, it was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. The acid and the tannin were not high enough probably to be Cab Sauv. So yeah, it's all learning experience.
Also, yeah, what kind of threw me, like if I was blind tasting this, the eucalyptus thing was really throwing me because I would think Malbec or Bordeaux, like you mentioned, but then the eucalyptus thing, I was like, oh, that's interesting because that would throw your head.
Yes.
You're thinking like the pyrazines and the green pepper and all that.
Yeah. And you really do have to take, when you're blind tasting, is take all the clues, all the components, because sometimes you just like look at one of them, like, oh, there's green notes in here. This is definitely a Bordeaux variety. And you just immediately go to the variety that it is. And really what it comes down to and why people do this in the first place, the whole getting the grape right is like part of the fun and part of the game, but it's really all about describing the wine and thinking about how would you describe this wine and all of its components, which is so helpful for me, especially if you're describing it for other people. So
you're good, my friend. You are good.
Yeah, you got it narrowed down. Those were my guesses.
I love it.
I think for Malbec too, I used to be able to call that one out in blind tastings.
Yeah.
Because like the nose and the taste like never perfectly lined up to me. Like I'd always smell like really like heavier aromas, but it would be like fruitier, like spicier on the nose, fruitier on the taste for me. And so it's fun. We did one recently that was like a French Malbec.
Yeah.
It was like totally different.
Yes.
Yes.
So that through, it was, but you could tell, you knew it was definitely old world because it was mustier, but it was that purple. When you said purple earlier, I was like, Malbec.
Ooh, yes. And that color can be a dead giveaway. Yeah. You can eliminate so many things with just the color sometimes.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Yes, this is something we definitely need to practice a lot more. I had my chart next to me, so I was like going through it with you.
Yes.
So I love the way you asked them. I was like, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you just look at a chart, you get overwhelmed, but you did a good job breaking it down and making sense.
Yeah, and that's what it can be fun. I think it's one of those things that can feel very intimidating, but once you know the flow, you're like, all right, like grid, that's fine. You can be here, but I'm just gonna go through this process and I'm gonna think about what I get, and then it becomes fun.
That's so nice. Yeah. We're going to go through and do this later. And I think, as you're hosting your classes and doing this with everyone, what's the future of the Grape Grind? What do you have next? I know you mentioned bringing back the in-person classes and your educational PDFs, but we'd love to learn more so we can follow you.
Yes. Okay. Well, I've told you that I currently do a lot of comparative and blinds just like this. So I do have a blind tasting club that you can go on and check out. It's called, you can get the blind tasting bundles and you can do this completely on your own. Like you don't have to have feel intimidated whatsoever, but we do have a non-intimidating tasting group that's connected to that as well, where you can meet on Zoom. We meet on Zoom once a month and go through, we go through the grid because a lot of people that join are students, but we also do it in a very kind of casual and welcoming way that we try very hard and do a really good job. I'm proud of my group because it's not me that makes that group. They just being inviting and making it fun also. And then so currently I'm also working on and planning on launching in the new year, hopefully in January, is a quiz platform. So a lot of the things that I have created are things that like I would have wanted, like when I was studying for exams. So the blind tasting group and the PDFs and the downloads is one of them. And I actually currently use my blind tasting frameworks that I offer on my own all the time. So I kind of made them for me, and then I was like, I think that other people would really get, you know, some value out of these, and so I started selling them. But the quiz platform will be that. It's kind of breaks. It's a subscription platform, and it's got quiz material for all levels of wine study, from very beginner to advanced. A good outlet for me as I'm studying, and just a fun way for people to kind of retain their wine information, you know, whatever they're studying. So yeah, that's coming up in the new year.
Great. Lots of good things to follow along with.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit of a lot of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am really passionate about tasting, and that's something that most people can relate to and enjoy in one way or another. So
for sure. Well, Kendeigh, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming and being our guest. Hopefully we can have you on again at some point, and you can do another tasting with us and take us through some more information. You're so, I love the way you break things down in such an easy to understand language, and it's not intimidating, and it's easy to understand, and I just love that. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I love to talk about wine and not be intimidating.
Right. I think we're all in that camp. So
yes. Yeah, it was great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to say cheers, and cheers to our Wine Affair people that are following us. Thank you again. Stay tuned for this episode and practice your blind tasting.
Yes, cheers to that.
Cheers. Thank you.